We'll call together this regular city council meeting, January 8th, 2018. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Good evening, Judy.
I'm here for Lisa.
Okay,
Should I disclose I'm probably going to leave early?
go ahead.
So I don't know what, I'm feeling under the weather, so I'm probably going to leave whenever it hits me. So just a heads up if I leave. Thanks.
We'll move on to approval of minutes from December 11th, 2017.
I have a few things here. On page 1, the middle of that first paragraph, it says RC should be CR for the closure work. It actually should say for the closure report. The CR was, yeah, well, that is self-explanatory. And down at the end of that paragraph, she's got the initials CB, and actually Chuck Harmon had been a Navy CB, which is SEABEE. And on page 10, at the conclusion of that paragraph for number 5, it should say, I also said, Kibble also said, we could get a meeting going if something came up. Which it did. That's all I had. Thank you. If nobody else has anything, I make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Approval of the bills?
Mr. Mayor,
You've got December 21st.
December 21st
Oh,
minutes.
thank you. Sorry. Approval of the minutes of December 21st, 2017.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Tim.
I had one change that I emailed around to the council on page 3. There's a motion to remove the, Councilmember Parisian made a motion to accept the resignation of Councilmember Rizzi, which was tabled. This council motion 12-3-17 does not show the vote. I believe it was a unanimous vote. And the paragraph after that should be revised to more clearly state that once it was back on the table, Councilmember Parisian withdrew her motion, thus resulting in no action taken by the council.
Thank you, Tim.
I'll move the minutes as amended.
All support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, now on to approval of the bills.
I have a few things.
Go ahead, Mary.
So I have been asking for quite some time for a liaison to either from DPW or from wastewater sewer treatment to come forward and discuss things that are pertinent in our bills that I think they're only qualified to do. So with that being said, I asked Ron Beeson to be here tonight and speak to some of the HRC bills that we have, so that way we can get a better idea of what the foundation is, what's going on, are these bills necessary, are these things we can do in-house, etc. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. Many of you know me, some of you don't. My name's Ron Beeson. I've been happily serving the city for 29 years as an operator. For the last 3 years, chief operator of the Water and Wastewater Department. And for the last 4.5 months since Bob's retirement, Ron Brock and myself have taken over many of his duties and responsibilities. So I'm here as a representative of the Water and Wastewater Department. Any questions pertaining to the operation or maintenance of the department, I'd be glad to answer. If I don't know the answer, I'll get you the answer.
Okay.
Thanks for being here, Ron.
Don't run away.
All right, so I'd like to get started on page, it's 1-4, and it is, let's see. No, I'm sorry, it's 3-4. And it is line 592, 556, operating expense, Paragon Laboratories, water analysis for $1,300.
Paragon Laboratories, that is the lab that does our water testing. You see an increase in this line item this month. We had a past due bill. It was paid, and also the DEQ is requiring us to do more water quality monitoring.
Okay.
So you're going to see this line item increase a little bit in the next few months. We have copper and lead coming up. They're the lab that does all of that testing for us. So you may see that increase coming in the next few months.
So this is a customary charge?
Yep, we do that. We have certain tests that need to be done.
Okay.
They perform them. There's TTHMs, there's 885s. This is stuff we cannot do at our lab. We're not qualified to do it, nor do we have the equipment to do it.
Excellent.
The DEQ, under our permit, requires us to do these tests. Some of them are quarterly. In fact, this bill probably represents a quarterly sample for those TTHMs, along with some WQP monitoring. So,
Excellent, that's exactly what I wanted to know. If you go down.
Could I ask a question? There's no requirement for a third-party test?
no.
Okay, thank you.
No, Paragon, we have Brighton Analytical that also does testing for us. But there's an array of tests that we cannot do, and they are certified. They give us the results. We send them in with our monthly reports every month.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I don't want to hog you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's my understanding that the DEQ has increased some of its reporting requirements
For us, yes.
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 in Michigan.
And that's what I was speaking, the WQP, which is the Water Quality Parameter Monitoring. They require that test to be done twice, every 2 weeks, so twice a month. And it's 3 tests, 3 bottles, and it's an array of tests. It's alkalinity, calcium, phosphate. There's just an array that they want. What we're looking for is inconsistencies. So that'll continue until some of our results come down.
Okay, and that it's my understanding that that is why there is a little bit of this increased testing is
There is.
because there is some out of the ordinary results that
There
are.
was an action level
Okay.
that we had in copper, not
It's,
lead,
No, copper.
copper, yes. And they require this, and this is on our water. We take several samples from 7 different businesses, and then from our distribution point, which is our water plant.
Okay, thank you.
I
Should I
got
keep
some.
going? Go ahead.
Okay, Ron, right?
Yes.
Okay, Ron, I got a few quickies for you here. On page 3-4 of invoice for GL distribution report, wastewater, you go down halfway in the middle there, it says Chemtrade Chemicals, aluminum sulfate,
Yes,
$5,500.
yes, that comes in truckloads.
I'm familiar with aluminum sulfate.
Yes.
Very important stuff. But how is it handled? How is it stored in our facilities?
We have a storage area. It's a fiberglass 2 storage tanks, so it's tankered in. We fill our storage tanks and we use it through the month. It usually lasts 30 to 40 days.
Oh, really?
Yes. So we're getting a huge truckload.
And you keep it liquid in a
It's liquid.
separate vat tank?
Yes.
You don't use the granular at all?
Nope. It's liquid.
Okay, sometime I'd like to see that. Move on to the next
I
question.
invite you to our plant anytime.
Okay, okay, for the benefit of the public here, I'm square on the salt, but what I'd like you to say is a little bit about Cargill, okay, Incorporated, okay? I have never heard of them before this, but I'm...
If you're talking about road salt, is that what
Yeah.
that would be DPW, that would be Ron Brock.
Okay,
So I have nothing to do with,
okay. Now, as I spoke to you before the meeting, up in general fund on line 2, just make a mention of this. Bader and Sons, and I know what that is. That's John Deere.
Yes.
Shaft, sprocket bearings, JD 1575. That's the broom. Okay. I've worked in machine shops, and my father was a master mechanic machinist. Whatever, I assume the shaft is about 4 foot. Okay.
It's another DPW item.
It is. That would be
Okay, I
round
just
rock.
want to bring it to your attention and the community's attention
This is the bills.
that we can make, any of the machine shops around this community can make that shaft from raw bar steel at the alloy grade that you're looking for, okay? And put the bearings on it. Okay, excuse me, I'll, yeah, same stuff as she had with Johnson Rosati.
Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, that's it. That's all for me.
I'm just going to run through a few more with you. Where we originally were with Paragon Laboratories, if you go down 2 more to Hubble, Roth, and Clark, it is WWTP generator semi-annual main for, Hubble, Roth, and Clark for $8,000, so $8,200.
Yes.
Can you speak to whether this is something that is customary, whether it's something that we can do in-house?
What I do know, that bill originated from 2 separate bills. One was the VFDs that Hubble, Roth, and Clark put a bid packet together, and the other is an asset management program. I can tell you the asset management program that they did was important. We needed it for our permit. They had the knowledge and the program. So yeah, that's something that, yes, they need to put together. They did it, was submitted to the DEQ on time. So we completed that task for our permit. As far as the VFDs, there's some confusion on these VFDs. The VFDs are for our high service pumps. It coincides with the painting of the tower. Dixon Engineering was hired to paint our tower. The VFDs are separate, but the idea was to have these installed prior to painting the tower. The reason for this, once we empty the tower, it will be completely empty. That's what gives you pressure throughout the city. Without that, you wouldn't have any pressure, you wouldn't have any flow or constant flow. The idea is to install the VFDs with pressure gauges on them so we can sustain that for a long period of time. To paint the water tower, it's probably a 30 to 40 day process to do the inside and outside. It has to be completely dry. Even the outside, if they're going to paint the outside, the condensation, they won't paint it unless it's empty. That gives us the pressure throughout the city. So that being said, we were going to do that, install those prior to having the tower painted. Now you've asked if that's something necessary that HRC would be involved in. I had discussions with Bob Martin before he retired. We had many conversations over this, and I believe the intention was to move forward as much as we can in-house. Not to say HRC did a great job. They were given permission. They put the bid packet together, and they bid it out, and we did receive 1 bid. So it's already done. It's complete. I think moving forward, we can do our due diligence. We can look at each project separately. We look at what we have in-house as far as expertise and knowledge, and then we look at our other sources. We have a great sources out there that we could use, companies that we're very familiar with. They're familiar with our system, and I think that's what we need to do from this point on.
I think that's a great idea. I also appreciate you clarifying because I didn't know any of that. So
I watched the council meetings from previous weeks, and I could see the confusion that things were getting mixed up with that the VFDs are separate than the water tower painting, but they coincide with each other. So
okay.
we need to have one done before the other.
Excellent, thank you. The next line, the bill for 1217, it's the generator semi-annual main.
Yes, that is done by Bridgeway Cummings. That's for our big generators, the diesels and the Cummings that are at the water plant and wastewater plant. These things are huge. They're old. They're from the 80s. They will come out and they do a load test. What that does, they put it under load at certain RPMs to make sure that that generator is going to work properly for the plants. And we run these under load every Wednesday at the wastewater plant and every 2 to 3 weeks at the water plant. So they go through it. They have a checklist. They look at the fluids. They look at the hoses. They check the battery, and then they do that load test.
Perfect. Okay, I swear I'm almost done. Just bear with me, guys.
It's okay.
If you go to the bottom of the page where it says Cummings, Bridgeway LLC, generator semi-annual for 14, I'm assuming that's the same.
One is for the wastewater plant, and one is for the water plant.
Perfect. Badger meter, which is 2 lines down from that,
Yes.
for 11,000.
Badger meter, that's for, it looks like 100 3/4-inch meter heads. What we're getting into is our old system. They had a battery life of 10 to 15 years. We're seeing those fail, and the new system, the Orion system, is what we're getting now. And so you'll see that it's only the heads, and we replace the heads. Most of the bodies are still good. They're 3/4-inch brass bodies. There was also some bigger meters in there. One was for the school. That was an expensive meter for the schools, and then some 1.5-inch that we like to keep in stock. And you'll see those at Colonial Acres and some of the other bigger complexes that we know that the ones in there, they're old, and they're going to be needing to be replaced. So we always like the time frame for getting this. It could be 4 to 6 weeks or even longer. We like to keep these in stock. So, and it's Phyllis always has after we read, she'll have a list of meter repairs, and so that's why we want to keep a stock of the meter heads too.
Perfect. Well, that's all that I have. And again, I appreciate you coming out to discuss this and at least lay the foundation for what it is that you do, what wastewater does, and what bills we spend.
If anybody has any questions at all, I'd be happy to answer them. Call me up. I'm there all the time. Some of you have my cards with my cell phone numbers. I'd be happy to answer any questions. If there's any confusion, I saw that there was.
There's a lot of confusion.
Yes, and I can clarify what these bills are. Just give me the opportunity to do that. Let me know beforehand, because I'm not in the same position that Bob was. I'm an operator. I've taken on a lot of those duties that Bob did, but I'm still an operator. I have to maintain and run the plant. So just so you know that, give me some time to get the bills if you have any questions.
Excellent.
I have a couple more if you have a minute. The idea that HRC had done the spec on the bid for the water tower painting, Dixon provides that service in-house, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was kind of stricken why we had to use our engineers when the vendor that was almost certain to get the bid.
I can tell you that the bid packet for that water tower was 180 pages long. It's very specific. You're more than happy. I think I have a copy back at the plant to look at it. But yeah, Dixon Engineering was hired to do that. They contract the painter. They do it all. They contract the painters. The only thing they're waiting on now is if we get these VFDs installed, they have to wait. And we're looking at probably, I think the deadline to have these installed were July 1st. So now we pushed everything back. We either do it in the spring or in the fall for the painting. We can't do it in the high use.
Right. Or the cold, yeah.
Or the cold,
yeah. Well, my point was, I guess the benefit is that with HRC doing the very, very specific bid package, if anything is overlooked or anything isn't up to snuff, at least we have some resource for leverage to get it.
And the bid that we got is from a company that we use often. Very dependable. They know our plant. But that was the only one that bid on it. So.
Okay, the generators that you had made reference to,
right.
Bridgeway coming in and and doing the inspections on them. They are old, but the benefit is every time we've had a failure of power, they always do exactly what they're supposed to do. So being old, I get that part replacement is difficult, but, but nonetheless, those are very, very big, robust machines.
They are.
So, and I wondered, and this isn't a bill directly, but the meter reading issue that had taken place, which has turned into a billing issue at City Hall. Apparently there had been some, it was estimates instead of actual readings, and there was some rate differentials or something that weren't correct. Are you familiar with what's going on with that?
Yeah, I'm not in the.
I can summarize that, and then Ron can add to it. There was an issue with a limited number of residences on the September reading. The telemetry failed to properly register into the electronic meter reading system. That resulted in some bills being higher than they should have been in October, and that was important because the summer bill includes a discount for the sewer rate because people are using water for sprinklers, car washing, pools, etc.
Sure.
So Phyllis is dealing with the individual homeowners now who received estimated bills, and that's how you can tell if you were affected.
Okay.
Either
that's
there'll be
actually what I brought this up for. I wondered
Yes.
if we could reach out to everybody that it would have been impacted.
There would be an A for an actual bill or an E for an estimated bill. Phyllis has a real good handle on where those homes are that were affected. She's dealing directly with them, and she will be adjusting water bills.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that it was being attended to as opposed to a customer having to make the call to find out if they were one of the people that were involved in that. That's all. That they recognized the differential and what their price point was. So.
I think Phyllis has it nailed down, but I will make sure over the
Yeah,
next
if you
couple
could
of weeks.
verify that, that'd be great. Okay. Well, you're off the hook there.
Thank you, Lloyd.
I got something.
No problem.
The paint that they'll be applying that we've asked for in this, is it a high resolution Emeron-based paint?
I know it. I don't know the exact composition.
The
of
same
paint.
stuff that they paint on chemical trucks that run around town here all the time.
It's specifically for water towers. I know that, and they're well aware of that. This is what they do. They'll spec it, and
How many years is it supposed to last?
that's I don't know. I know that the last time we painted it was at least 15 years, or if longer.
Oh, yeah, much longer, actually 25.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been a long time, and it's a need. If you notice,
sure,
it has
yeah.
some rust spots, and the longer we wait, the worse it's going to get, obviously. And so as soon as we move forward on if we're going to do the VFDs or we'll look at other options, we need to know. We need direction. It's what we need. So.
That's it for me.
All right. Well, thank you for coming out tonight, Ron.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question?
Go ahead, Mike.
I'm on the attorney invoices. Tim, I've seen this on a couple of invoices. Real quick, 2 seconds. What's the issue with the Alexander Center?
I've been receiving phone calls from an attorney on behalf of Alexander Center inquiring about possible next steps.
For what?
An appeal of the planning commission's decision or to file for a variance related to the parking requirements.
Okay, so it's the same issue when I was on the planning commission. That was, he wants to use more space in the restaurant than what our ordinances provide for with respect to parking in the parking lot.
And the matter was presented to planning commission, and there was a denial of the request to modify that site plan condition.
Mm-hmm.
And the attorney has been, for lack of a better way of putting it, trying to get me to do his job and tell him what he should do next.
Did he ever record the deed to the property? Because when I was on the planning commission, he didn't even record the deed to the property so that the property taxes would lift off with respect to Headley. He was hanging on to that deed.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that issue, so it's never come up between he and I.
Well, you should have the deed recorded to that property so that you know who the right owner is that you're dealing with. That was the argument I made back in the planning commission, and he didn't want to record the deed of transfer. The next one is, I saw in here the terms for a proposed contract for downtown banner. Do you have a contract for a banner installation? Is it moving forward?
I was asked to prepare a contract by Director Donahue, and I don't have much information that I provided the contract to him and copied Lynn. I don't know where it's at since then.
Okay, I'm not opposed to it because that's a downtown issue, and I was surprised to see it on there because I was led to believe it wasn't going to be till spring until we were going to get to that. I mean, I was glad to see it was moving forward.
The request for the contract was from the contractor, Harlan Electric, and they felt they had enough information. They decided they didn't need a contract. We had our insurance certificates from them. We had everything that we initially requested from them. And so we moved forward because they no longer requested the contract. They performed the work according to standard, and they gave us all their insurance. They gave the Oakland County Road Commission insurance as well.
Okay, thank you. And the last question, which I was really confused about, dealt with 2.5 almost conversation that you had with the city manager regarding council members attending other board and commission meetings. And that was over a 2-hour phone conversation. I guess...
I don't mean to cut you off, but that's more than just the conversation with the city manager. That was follow-up with her regarding the comments that were made and the discussion that occurred during the council meeting about council members' desire to attend other board and commission meetings, and that includes my research and discussion with her about how to proceed with that issue.
Okay, I'm going to have more comment on that when we come to the ethics.
I did see that as well.
Pardon?
That, yes, it's referenced in the ethics ordinance.
Yeah, in the ethics ordinance, exactly. Okay. And then I would just like to note that it appears that we have a substantial amount of attorney billing related to HR issues.
Yes.
Do you think the city is probably ready for a part-time HR?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I just want to ditto what Maggie said, but on page 9, research regarding comments at council meetings. This is a free country, okay? And for those of you who don't know, 2.2 translates to $320 or thereabouts for a phone conversation that should have taken 30 minutes in my estimation, but I wasn't there, okay? For the people that never bother to vote, all the citizens of the community, just want to make note of that, okay? That I brought this up, and that's all I'll say about it.
Does anyone have anything else? All right. We'll move on to the
I
approval.
make a motion that we approve the bills.
Oh, thank you.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Moving on to the approval of the agenda. Chief.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do have one addition to request under old business. I would like to add item number 3. The agenda note and documentation has been passed out to council. It is consider interim manager pay.
I'll move the agenda.
That's on.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Where'd my magnifying glass go? I guess I have to use this.
Swearing in ceremony, Fire Chief Vogel.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to invite our longtime former fire chief, Mike Kennedy, to the microphone to introduce his successor and our new fire chief.
All right, Mayor and Council, definitely very bittersweet evening for me. but it's also a very distinguished honor for me to be able to introduce the next fire chief of the South Lyon Fire Department. So I'd invite the Vogel family to come forward, please. With my turnaround of the job opportunity I pursued, we had a pretty quick turnaround. Did an external posting, reviewed numerous applicants. The application criteria were pretty tight, so it limited the pool, but we had 5 that we invited for a oral board. We ended up getting that down to 3, and without any question, Rob just stood head and shoulders above the other candidates. Personally, Rob and I go back basically to the beginning of my venture in the fire service. He started off in the paid on-call service. He gets that. He gets the sense of community. And so I have absolute faith and confidence that Rob is going to do a wonderful, fantastic job of leading this great fire department forward and serving this outstanding community. So I'd ask Rob and Denise will pin the badge. If you guys want to kind of come up that way. We'll do the swearing in, and then I'll let Rob make some comments. I'd ask the deputy clerk to do the swearing in, please.
You raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Robert Vogel,
Do solemnly swear
that
I will support the Constitution of the United States
I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the state,
and the Constitution of the state,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of Fire Chief for the City of South Lyon
as Fire Chief of the City of South Lyon
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
I ask that you please pin the badge. And I'd like to introduce Rob Vogel, his wife Denise, son Parker, and he also has a daughter, Gabby, that was unable to be here tonight. She's up at college. So. All right, congrats, Chief Vogel.
Congratulations.
I am very honored to be here. I'm thankful to Chief Kennedy, Chief Collins, and those people standing behind me. They've made the last 2 weeks very, very easy for me. The transition was uneventful. I'm grateful to you all, and I promise to do my best for you all. And people behind me, I'm just so grateful, and my family here, and thank you very much. Thank you.
If I could just say you have some big shoes to fill, but you have a very capable crew to help you through this.
At this time, we would welcome public comment. Please state your name and address.
Judy's coming up.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Hello there, how are you?
Hi. Judy Keeling, 6180 Arlington Circle, and that's Colonial Acres. I just really wanted to thank the fire chief for all his service, but he left. But I still...
He's back.
Oh, good. I want to thank you personally for all your service to our community, especially from Colonial Acres. You get a special thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if that's it for public comment, we'll move on to old business. Number 1, discussion of downtown.
Excuse me a little, I'm having kind of an under the weather moment, so I hope I can get through. I can sympathize with Mary. You have my report. Chief Collins got that out to you a little earlier. I'd like to note a couple of items. Good Day Cafe is open, kind of in a soft opening. Unfortunately, they had a major water issue that maybe Chief could speak to. And DPW is out. They found out it is within the public right-of-way. It's a DPW issue. And water, issue. And DPW. So they're doing an excellent job to get them up and running. Chief, anything to offer?
I spoke with Ron Brock, the foreman for DPW, as late as a little after 6 tonight. They were still working at that time, but they were going to button up the hole, put insulation down, and put safety coverings in place and stop work for the night. They were not making a whole lot of progress on either the water line from the stop box to the main, or they did discover some blockages from between the stop box and the business meter itself. So we had blockages in both directions. They're going to come back bright and early in the morning and continue working and try to get the business up and running as quickly as possible. We have been in close contact with Jennifer McPherson and Gary Fagan, the business principals. They know what's going on. They'll be kept constantly in the loop. I've personally been out to the site either 3 or 4 times today, and we're doing our very best to get them back into service.
Thanks, Chief.
It's once they get through that little dilemma, it's really an exciting place. And you know how brutal social media can be? I would say 99% of the people just love what they offer. Their food is really exceptional. And it's fun to be there and see the people, and everybody's leaving happy. Well, 99% of the people are happy. So as you know, they're a lunch and, a breakfast and lunch deli. Their hours are Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. Saturdays are 7 to 2. And we wish them all the luck in the world, and we'll be working with them on an official grand opening in the next few weeks.
Great.
A couple other items on the list. The DDA will have its second annual board retreat on Thursday, February 15th. And right now, I will also provide at the next meeting for council the benchmarking statistics, the investment and job creation from the July 2016 to December 2017. Excuse me, July 2017 to December 2017 period. It's that 6-month gap since the last annual report, just to kind of let everybody know where we're going. And also kind of a projection of the projects that we see for 2018. I've talked with Chief Collins and sent an email to Tim Wilhelm. We're going to be meeting on the 4 buildings, the maintenance issue. And we're going to start off with I hate to use the word soft, but a reasonable approach to start the clock. And I'm now researching all of the last few years with each of the 4 property. And we'll have a very amicable discussion. We'll set some time frames and move forward in a reasonable manner and proceed, hopefully, to get some action.
Mr. Donahue's the good cop.
So Tim and Lloyd will be the bad cop and Don Gotham. No, I think hopefully that everyone will come together and we'll get some action, the right thing accomplished. So, by the way, I've looked at that ordinance. It's a very good job that was done compared to my time with Oakland County and other communities, and I think you're lucky to have such a good ordinance. I'm continuing to find really good information for Councilman Kurtzwell regarding platform dining. Mm-hmm. And I'm also going to be discussing that with our city attorney to come up with a potential procedures or policy, try to decide on the best way to proceed. And I think we could have something for the next season available for some of our restaurants. So we'll have that coming forward. A really exciting project. The owner of the property south and west of the Veterans parking lot has asked me to work with City Council and the City Manager's office to lay out the next steps for their development. It's about a $6 to $7 million development that was briefly discussed at City Council with regards to tax abatement or facade grants. And so the details of that are coming together, and we're going to look at the options, the correct procedures to have the property traded or purchased and how that works. It's the developer, Gene Carroll's intent is to take a 20-space parking lot and provide in the future a 50-plus space parking lot. So how that works with a trade or sale, we'll be working with the city manager to lay out those parameters so that we can move forward. And the building that is proposed is absolutely in line with our master plan, so it'll be a very exciting step for this community. And hopefully we can see some major presentations and approvals take place in 2018. Very exciting. The last item is that going to meet with the city attorney. Again, I mentioned this to Lloyd Collins. Superb Fabricating is planning a major expansion. They've been contemplating this for 2 years. They now feel it's time to go forward. And so they are asking for a tax abatement. And so we have to visit that same procedure that was done with Michigan Seamless Tube. And at the desire of the City Council, we'll move forward on that. But we'll present it in a professional fashion and see where the cards lay. And other than that, I am really looking forward to an exciting 2018. We have some physical projects, and we've been talking about them for about a year and a half, but we have 5 buildings and some new businesses, and I think we'll all be pleased that it's finally happening. So I look for a great 2018. I'm really excited about the progress our Downtown Development Authority has made and the support of all you folks, so looking forward to a great year. Thank you.
Very quick.
Yes, sir.
I agree with you, okay, about what's got to go on. And on the properties in question, the 4 buildings that are in bad repair, okay, I would like to be involved at sitting in on your meetings if that would be allowable, okay? Because I'm familiar with the whole deal, okay?
Sure.
Been in all of them, okay?
Sure, understand. I would say I'll take my lead. We've had city council people involved in committees. I'll take my lead from the city attorney or the city manager as to how that works.
If it's against the ethics or something, okay, but I mean, I should be able to add valuable information for the progress of the city with what I know, okay?
I love the fact that you people want to be involved. That's awesome. So we'll take the proper procedures and move forward.
Okay, letting you know. Thank you.
Is anyone, Maggie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this at council comment, but I do want to say that I would agree with you. I think there is the potential. There is the potential for 2018 to be absolutely unbelievable for the city of downtown. But that means a lot of pieces to the puzzle are going to have to be working. And I'm looking at this strictly from a business and economic point of view. With the recent passing of the 2017 tax cut, which is geared towards businesses, I would say the sooner you get moving on those evictions, the better off you're going to be in terms of getting that, not evictions, but clearing up the blight property, because you are now in potentially a historic economic environment that most people in this room have never been through. If we get the amount of money that is going to come into this economy, if we're going to get the job growth, if we're going to be approaching 4% GDP, we have no idea what it is going to do to the growth in the downtown. And we have to think like entrepreneurs, and we have to be there for every business opportunity that comes by, because these opportunities are not going to come by again. I mean, he's not always going to be in office. Who knows what the next individual will do, but for right now, these tax cuts potentially can reform this downtown and change it literally overnight. I've received phone calls from 4 people that want to look at investing in downtown as a result of that tax cut. And I'm going to be meeting with them for other reasons, but I'm just saying that the potential is almost, whatever we want it to be, if we're smart about what we're doing. So the sooner that blighted property gets taken care of, and the sooner those properties get on the market, the sooner you're going to find investors that have money, or the individual who owns the building is going to get serious about getting some businesses there, because you're going to have businesses lined up that are going to want to come into South Lyon, and you're going to need space. So I would strongly encourage whatever plan you have going, that it be completed by tomorrow. I mean, I'm serious. I don't know what else to say, because it is going to be that changing of a business environment. Additionally, with respect to tax abatements, I did some work on that. You know, I just want to add my 2 cents on the tax abatements. You know, tax abatements are generally used to encourage a business to come into a town. They're not normally used to provide tax abatements for somebody who's already here and existing. I was not in favor, although I was not on city council at that time, for the tax abatements for the Michigan tool, seamless tool. I definitely will not be in favor of tax abatements either for the Jean Carroll project or for the fabricating. And the reason is because if you look at the tax cut, they are going from a 36% tax rate down to 21%. They are also getting tremendous tax incentives for improving their property. So there's their tax abatement. What the federal government did was the federal government shifted the tax abatement issue from local communities, and they gave it in through this tax abatement. That's the one thing that they don't talk about, because it probably doesn't, you know, suit somebody's agenda. But the reason that that tax law was structured the way it was in favor of businesses was to shift some of that tax liability that local communities were incurring to try to keep businesses there. Well, now that tax abatement is built into that tax cut. So I will not be in favor of, I mean, I'm just letting you know. I mean, I'm pretty transparent, and I lay my cards out on the table pretty early. So I would not be in favor of it, because I think there's a federal program already in place that is going to give them incentives to do exactly what they want to do. The last issue is for Jean Carroll. If he's going to be doing business with the city of South Lyon, and if he's on the DDA, does that present a conflict of interest? And I'll let the city attorney deal in that. Other than that, I think this is a year that we just have to keep our nose to the grindstone, all hands on deck, and get ready, because this could be absolutely unbelievable, what is getting ready to come down the pike. And it will trickle down. It will. You have so much money that potentially is going to be coming into the consumer's pocket. The demand, the consumer demand in this area for that downtown is going to be huge. Absolutely huge. Huge. Interest rates are going to be rising, not as much as they have been before. I mean, not really high, but you will see some increases. I don't think it's negatively going to affect the housing industry. I don't think we're at rate-sensitive kind of issues yet, but I think your housing market on the 10-mile corridor is going to remain strong. Just in case people want to know, I know 2 realtors that have what's called pocket listings. They don't even list property anymore because they have a list of people that want to move into South Lyon. It's called a pocket listing. You go to the right realtor with the right list, and he's got the right house, and it never hits the market. I mean, that's how fast some property in the city is selling. And I know that with personal knowledge. So it's coming. It's coming. It really is. And I think, Bob, you know, you're going to be spending a lot of time.
I look forward to it. You know, it's really...
I mean, I don't know if I'm off course or not, but I think
I agree. It's a team thing. Certainly we have the demographics for not only our city, but the surrounding communities, and that's really the difference. But I appreciate the opportunity to quarterback it. I appreciate the support. I think instituting the Main Street program where the community is involved in the management, that's what the National Main Street program is all about. That's the exciting part. We're seeing citizens step up for design issues and the design committee, the promotions and marketing aspect. And so we're really instituting the Main Street program and getting this as a transparent, community-involved process. And it's all coming together. It's almost textbook, but we're cruising into year 2, and we'll see actually year 3 of the program start, and we'll be there. We'll be there.
Great. Does anyone have anything else for Bob? Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Number 2 on the old business, consider adopting revised code of ethics. Now, the recommendation for this on the agenda note was to place on the January 22nd regular council meeting agenda for a first reading.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Tim.
I can address this. So I didn't draft this. This was drafted by Mel Muskovitz of Dykema as the last part of his investigation report. So I don't know that there's been a lot of time with this ordinance. I really didn't spend any time reviewing it. I did look through it for definition purposes and so forth, but that recommendation came from me. I just want to make that clear.
Okay.
You're free to do with it as you will.
Maggie?
Yeah, I spent some time on this. Why did it come up? I'm just curious. Why did it come up?
If you look back at Mr. Muskovitz's report, and I looked back at it, it doesn't have a date on it, but I thought it was February of 2017. There were 5 bullet points that he numbered in the beginning of his report. 5 and 6 relate to making recommendations for policy changes or ordinance changes related to the ethics ordinance that exist. This is really just a completion, and he made it clear when he spoke to council that that was something he wasn't going to deal with right off the bat.
I just have a quick question. Ron, I'm just going to ask you, and just do a quick sample. Have the employees over at the water department, to the best of your knowledge, have you been given an opportunity to read this ordinance and sit down and go through it and understand it? Okay, that's an HR issue. I mean, I'm just bringing that to somebody's attention. That's an HR issue. Because there are several things that are in this ordinance that directly relate to employees, including the use of public property. You know, some of these items, employees should be well versed on with respect to providing employment or whatever, or service to the city of South Lyon. So I wanted to bring that issue up. Also, I wanted to ask you on political activity on page 5, section 2-77. I'd like to know, is this limiting people's after-work activity? It seems pretty broad. I'm just bringing that to, I'm not ready to work on this, but I'm just some things that I spotted that I sort of looked at and said, well, I don't know how we are going to regulate after-work activity, but it does seem to say that you cannot engage in political activity during any of your employment here.
To be very frank, I've not looked at this issue. He's not proposing any significant changes to that section, so that's an existing ordinance. As I'm sure you're aware, political activity in the employment context raises a number of complicated First Amendment type issues. I'm not going to pretend that I know all of that off the cuff. If you're looking for some information about the legality of this ordinance, we can certainly provide that for you.
Well, that's, I mean, if you're going to take a look at the ordinance, then why not take a look at the ordinance?
I didn't draft the ordinance.
Okay, I know you did. This is just a historical document that has been provided with the city. But I don't know if I'm comfortable sitting here approving an ordinance that I am now reading and saying, well, wait a minute, if we're going to sit here and approve it for changes that he has suggested, why not take a good overall review of the ordinance and make some of these changes like that? You know,
that's exactly why I recommended that it be pushed off for
These are his recommendations.
Yeah, but it was
a good discussion, because I'd like to know what you would like to look at, and
that would be
given that I didn't draft it, if you want other things, the question becomes, do you want Mr. Muskovitz to look at it, or do you want me to look at it?
Well, I mean, I think at this point you could probably look at it. I think
we paid him enough.
You know, well, he was a good attorney, so I'd be careful about. $42,000. He was an excellent attorney, but I think at this point we could probably move back. And I mean, you've done enough ordinance drafting, work on it. There was another example in here. It had to do with legislation. I wasn't quite sure. What that was all about is having a conflict of interest with I didn't know if that meant if I was a lobbyist, or if it meant that, say for example, I went and took a very vocal opinion on legislation up in Lansing that potentially could be adverse to the city, but because I have a different point of view, I don't know what that exactly means. So I wanted to take a look at that. Also on page 3. It's number 4. representing private interests before city agencies or courts. This sort of goes to the item on your invoice. And it's about representing private interests before city agencies or courts. A city official may appear before city agencies on behalf of constituents in the course of his or her duties as a representative of the electorate. But you can't accept a retainer or compensation. That seems to be consistent with the case that was provided at one of our prior discussions. It's the Township of Cokeville, where I think I spent a little bit of time talking about the relevance of that case in permitting us to be able to go to a planning commission meeting, to go to a culture arts commission, and advocate a position. It's right there in the ordinance that is absolutely permissible.
Well, it's not an ordinance that I drafted, so my advice doesn't change. I don't recommend that you do that as a best practice. Certainly, if you want to push that, and I did get a uniform pushback from all of you, if you want to attend those, you're running a risk. There is a risk. But I think legally, you are allowed to do, under certain circumstances, to attend those meetings in certain contexts and participate in a certain manner. Just recognize that the Cokeville opinion resulted in litigation in order to find that out.
But you got the answer, and you have an ordinance that says it's okay.
But anybody can sue you.
Well, so what?
So why go through and
I just don't get bothered by that stuff.
That will expose you to potential litigation unnecessarily.
Well,
Bob's got his hand up over there.
Mr. Donahue, go ahead.
Thank you, Tim.
With that conversation, I have a question. As an economic development professional, I'm a member of different associations. I'm by nature very pro-economic development. And I am not a lobbyist, never act as a lobbyist. I know that public officials can advocate, but they cannot lobby. Mm-hmm. They can educate, but they cannot lobby. But I am myself involved, and I would like to know, I don't want to cross any line, I am involved in legislative issues at the state and federal level, and I want to make sure that I conform with any city policy, just so you're aware.
Tim?
Just generally off the cuff, the concern with the council members is that they typically appoint the people to the bodies where they would be attending the meeting, and there's the potential to have that interpreted in a different way. You're not a decision maker that appoints those members, so the analysis is quite a bit different. And that's the nature of the biggest difference in how you would start that analysis.
I think we're talking about the ordinance is pretty broad. So I don't know if the ordinance is talking about legislation with respect to what the Planning Commission does. They come up with an ordinance. Or are we talking about legislation at the state level, at the federal level? And then I come in here and I, argue for a position, or, like the MML will send out a resolution and say, we want the city to adopt this resolution supporting this legislation. That's the kind of legislation I'm talking about.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Tim.
At the local level, at this level, I think legislation can be interpreted as ordinances.
Yeah.
If you do a liquor license, if you do food trucks, those are forms of legislation. You're an elected official on a legislative body.
Carl?
Tim, I read through this as much as I could see. When it gets down to the red ink down here and the micro-sized letters, it was pretty difficult for me, even with a magnifying glass. But it says in here that if we adopt this, we have to create a board of ethical review. Okay, now nothing like that's ever existed. We've never had any such thing, to the best of my knowledge. Okay, but if the whole thing is rather vague, okay, to begin with, how are we going? People may want, from the general public, they may not want to be part of it or attend. It may not be very strongly knit together. This is my only speculation. What do you think about that? Okay,
Mr. Mayor and Council. So your current ordinance provides for a board of ethics, I think is the term. It currently is created and authorized under your current ordinance. As far as I know, it's never been populated. And that's one of the questions that Mr. Muskovitz, I think, is raised in the background is, Do you want to, and if you have it, I would recommend that you populate it. Or if you're not willing to populate it, let's figure out how to deal with, a different direction, whether it can be removed, just removed altogether, or do you need some other way to deal with the gap that's created by that?
Thanks, Tim.
I don't have any answers.
So do we have any action on this?
No. I think the 22nd, this will probably be digested enough to really speak, with some good ideas and the best understanding of it. To have the weekend, it's a little bit more than I had time for.
Yes, I'll make the motion. That the proposed amendment to the city's ethics ordinance presented by Dykema be placed on the agenda for January 22nd, 2018, regular city council meeting.
No support.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Item number 3 on old business was added in regards to interim city manager pay.
Is that in the stuff we got here?
That document is before council as an additional item.
Okay,
That's what you want.
okay.
I'm enjoying seeing the numbers on the item list here, too.
Yeah.
Yes, some of those I prepared, some were already prepared. In the future, I will make a very serious attempt to have them all numbered.
Thank you.
It does help.
Okay, I move to authorize a 25% increase in Chief Collins' salary effective January 3rd, 2018 until further action by City Council, rescinding his appointment as interim city manager. Well, I don't know if we're rescinding your appointment as an interim city manager. I'm willing to give you an increase, but I'm not willing to make you, I'm willing to make you the interim city manager.
That was the intent, that the 25% increase would only be in effect until council takes action to rescind the act of making me interim manager.
Okay,
So
let
once
me,
I'm out as interim manager, the 25% goes away.
okay, all right, so I am gonna withdraw that, and now I'm gonna say I am making a motion to authorize a 25% increase in Chief Collins' salary effective January 3rd, 2018 until further action by City Council for his services as interim city manager.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep, Mr. Wilhelm before. Yep.
I recall somewhere we came across this issue, and I'm trying to find it in the charter, related to contracts for services that have already been provided.
You can't do it.
I just want to make sure that we're not, would the council be willing to table this for a little bit while I take a look through the charter?
Well, you can provide him with a 25% increase for services that he provides commencing tomorrow. I think the charter was concerned about having people go out and provide services and then backtracking and entering into a contract.
Correct.
I think that was the issue.
So my only concern is the effective date.
Okay, well then why don't we move this to the end of the agenda and give you some time to take a look. How's that?
That would be much appreciated.
Okay, I move to table the interim manager's pay request to item number 10 of new business.
No support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay. Moving on to new business. Number 1, set time for special meeting on January 18th, 2018.
I'd like to make a motion that we continue with the 7:30 time as all of our other meetings are.
The 7:30?
7:30 p.m.
Oh, is that right? Does that help you out?
Yes, it does.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't have any problem with that.
I don't either.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Maggie, did you second?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Deputy Clerk.
Thank you.
All right, number 2, consider approving 2018 City Council meeting schedule. Did anyone see any conflict or anything in these dates?
Are we canceling December 26th?
They're all second and fourth Mondays, so.
Right. I don't know, I guess that's something we could talk about in December.
That's fine. Works. I guess I'll make the motion to approve the regular city council meeting dates as presented.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? New business number 3, proposed restrictive covenant for 128 South Lafayette. The recommendation for this business,
Postponed to February 12th.
Thank you, Glenn. Do we have a discussion?
You said that Arcadis has some information that they've given to you and you just want to review it?
Yeah, I need to
Okay.
work, so they've submitted additional information, and just given the end of the year issues, I did not get that out to ASDI yet. I'd like them to review it and get organized before it's brought back to council, and we can do it in a more organized fashion.
Okay. Have you glanced at it, or you have no idea what their pitch
This was
is?
the cost itemization, and I have not looked to see what the changes, if there were any, to the restrictive covenant. And they also provided a tailored, I forget the terminology used, but the additional assurance letter that would clarify that they're still on the hook as the financially and legally responsible for the contamination and any costs that arise out of their predecessors' activities.
Good. Did the financial breakdown seem to be, they were demonstrating that $15,000, what that had been broken down with?
That was my understanding, but I don't recall any of that.
All right, thank you. Well, I make a motion that we postpone to February 12th.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Moving on to new business number 4, designate council contact for MERS labor negotiations. The recommendation for this business, designate a council member as a contact for union negotiations.
Mr. Mayor?
Tim?
Mayor, Council, so as you recall, in the first meeting of December, the council approved the change in the MERS program for the non-union administrative new hires. It's my understanding that the council and you've directed the staff to go pursue that with the remaining employees. Because they're unionized, that needs to, those issues, some of the details of the various contributions and some of the details on that need to be bargained. Pat Azeltine from my office has requested, because of Lynn's leave, that we have somebody on council that he can go to with some of these questions on the day-to-day purposes. This would be basically in lieu of your city manager. As always, final contracts or memorandum of understanding would be brought to council before any final action would be taken. So we're just looking for somebody that he can talk to on a day-to-day basis.
I live close to City Hall. I'd be willing to do it if you think I could handle it, of a liaison in this matter. It'd make most sense as far as smooth government for me to come a block up here to enter into discussion when necessary, you know?
I certainly think you could participate. I'd like to, if at all possible, I would prefer one of the council members that have more experience with the union contracts.
Okay.
involved as well. Simply because of a familiarity aspect.
Dan, it's all you.
How routinely do you think there's going to be interaction?
Pardon?
How routinely do you think there's going to be interaction?
I don't really have a sense of that.
Yeah,
I think
okay.
it's, if they do this, they're asking for this, do you think the council will support that? What do you think of it? Can I move forward with this? That kind of questioning, I think. It can all be done by phone or by email, and I think it's really to avoid Pat going off without having some frame of reference that council finds this type of position to be acceptable. If we need to go into have a strategy session to clarify any of those issues, that we can certainly do that. But I think he's just looking for a day-to-day contact to report to, kind of keep everybody up to speed so that he's not off doing things that council would not find acceptable for any reason.
Well, I think that it'd be difficult for any single member here to speak for the entire body. And most of the things that I think that you could confidently answer that question, Pat would probably know innately what the best direction would be.
Understood, but I think it's not any different than him dealing with the city manager. The city manager doesn't get to vote and doesn't get to decide for the council, yet the city manager is always used as a resource to help inform what the city's position is with respect to these bargained issues. And this is, we're looking for somebody from council because the city manager is
Sure,
out of the
I get
office.
that someone actually will be voting on it. Well, I can throw my hat in the ring. I mean, I've certainly approved an awful lot of contracts here, so.
I would support that, just simply because I feel as though I'm still pretty new, where MERS to me is still uncharted territory, and I struggle with wrapping my head around some of the concepts. So I would support that, Glenn. Thank you for stepping up.
All in favor of designating Councilmember Kivel as contact for union negotiations?
Someone's going to need to make a motion.
Can we formulate a motion?
Yeah.
Motion to appoint Glenn Kivel as the contact for union negotiations relating to changes to the MERS retirement plan for new hires in the union employee groups.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Sam, you finally get your turn.
Number 5 on new business tonight, discussion regarding GFL contract and request decision regarding extension or bid process. Now, the recommendation on this business this evening is pursue extension of GFL contract extension proposal and not put the contract out for bids.
There's a couple of very qualified speakers that we should probably listen to.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Tim.
Mayor and council, so I want to keep, we have Mike Sapo from Rossock here, and we have Sam Carmano from GFL USA here. I want to let them speak to their issue. I want to quickly frame this up. The question that council is being asked is, do you want to extend the contract, and you can get into some of the terms that are being presented, or do you want to put the contract out for bid? It expires in on June 30, 2018. This question is being asked because it will take you that long to go through a bid process, award the bid, evaluate, award it, and get somebody kind of up to speed before June 30th if that's the direction you want to take. So the question you're being asked is pick path 1 or pick path 2, and I'm going to let these guys talk to you about the details of those various options, primarily the extension option.
Thank you, Tim. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mike Sapo. I'm with the Rossock. We're the Resource Recovery and Recycling Authority of Southwest Oakland County. Some of you are new faces to me and me to you. But I help the city as part of our authority secure and manage its solid waste contracts, among many other things, dealing with solid waste and recycling. So what I wanted to do this evening very quickly is sort of put this issue before you in the proper context. As the city attorney explained, you have a contract with GFL that expires June 30th of this year. It does typically take 6-7 months to go through a process of selecting a new vendor or a new contract if you go through your bid process. So now would be the time to make a decision on whether or not you want to go through a bid process or extend it as is allowed under both your city procedures and the existing contract that you have. The context really ought to be sort of three questions. Is it allowable? And I think we already answered that question, to do either of those things. Are you comfortable with your current city services provided by your current contractor? Are they doing the job you expect of them? From my perspective, as an objective bystander, I think the answer is yes, but that's a decision that South Lyon elected officials, administration, and residents have to decide for themselves. And then thirdly, is what's being proposed for an extension a good price? Is it competitive? Is it what you might expect to see if you were to go out for bid, or is it better than what you might expect to see if you go out for bid? I'll answer the third question this way. So we do routinely, every couple of years, we do a deep dive into the municipal budgets of dozens of cities across southeast Michigan. And we look at their sanitation expenditures and we boil that down to a per capita and per household basis to really do an apples to apples as best we can comparison about how sharp is your pencil when it comes to the expenditures in the city for sanitation services. Recycling, yard waste, refuse collection, your household hazardous waste program. Every single year I've done this, South Lyon is at the bottom or near the bottom in terms of expenditures on a per household basis. What I'm saying is you have a very sharp pencil, you have a very low cost service, while at the same time your recycling rate's about 45%, so that's head and shoulders above most of the state and certainly above the regional average and above the national average. So your program performance is very good. You historically have a very good contract with a local service provider, and as we all know, that's changed recently. So that's part of what's driven your costs down to be so low, is because you had a nearby contractor that knew the community and provided those services very cost effectively. Now with the GFL taking over as your contractor, that's continued to be the case. They have continued to maintain the contract price. Your services really haven't changed in any meaningful way. But what's being proposed is a contract extension so you can maintain the service that you have, maintain that status as a community that provides service very cost effectively to your homeowners. But at the same time, look for some opportunities to enhance the contract that you have, to integrate some new practices into the contract. And essentially, there's a couple of things that we've suggested be done. One is to provide recycling carts for your residents. Allow them to opt in for carts. Instead of having the little bin, allow them to have a 64-gallon cart on wheels. You have a handful of residents that have done that. There's sort of an off-the-radar program for that right now. But that's considered best practices across the country, and that's considered best practices in the recycling industry and here in southeast Michigan is allow residents to have a recycling cart. So the proposal on the table for an extension, if it's a 4-year extension as originally proposed, it's at a certain price point. Sam can get into the details of that later, but it would allow everybody to opt in for a cart, whereas if it's boiled down to a shorter extension, a 3-year extension, there'd be a limit as to how many people could do that before there'd be some cost incurred to the city. And that's just a matter of being able to amortize those capital costs, both the cart and the truck over a longer period of time. One of the other changes that we've recommended, and as you found in the proposal letter from Sam, is to limit your potential increases. Currently, your contract allows for a 3% increase based on the CPI, with the opportunity to go below that based on wherever the CPI falls. But what we've been pushing over the past several years is a lower potential increase capped at 2%. It tends to be right around where the CPI falls anyway, but it limits your exposure. If we get runaway inflation, your exposure is capped at 2%, and it lends some price predictability to your expenditures, and also, again, limits the exposure to higher increases. So that's the context to what's being proposed tonight. From my perspective, I've looked at your pricing, not just your expenditures as a community, but your pricing vis-a-vis other ROSOC communities and vis-a-vis recent bids. I would be shocked if you were to get any better pricing through a bid process. Not to say it couldn't happen, but looking at where trends are, looking at who the vendors are and what they've bid recently in this market, and I think what you have before you, both whether it's the 4-year extension, which I would recommend if you're interested in extension, or the 3-year extension, which I think is also good. What you're looking at is a very competitive price that I think you're unlikely to beat in any meaningful way if you go out for bid. And it does come with some improvements to the overall contract. So with that, I'd either answer any questions you have, or if you'd like to hear from Sam to discuss some of the specifics of why they've proposed what they've proposed, I'd be happy to yield the microphone.
Go ahead, Carl.
I think it's a pretty good idea to continue on, but when I'm looking at it here for the 64-gallon containers for residents, okay, for commercial maybe, but in my opinion, average residents aren't going to require the need of a 64-gallon container on wheels for recyclables.
Well, if I beg to differ, what we found is that most people actually in a standard 4 or 5 person household can fill up one of those carts every week, but that's the beauty of what's being proposed to you, is that the homeowner that wishes to have the 64-gallon cart, they can avail themselves of that option and use it as they need it, so they can set it out every week or every other week or however often they need to set it out. But if they want to stick with their current 18-gallon bin, they're more than welcome to continue with that. So this is not an obligation that any homeowner would have to switch to the cart, but it gives them an opportunity. We've got communities throughout Southeast Michigan and throughout the country that use these 64-gallon carts. In my household, we have 4 people in my household. We fill up 2 every 2 weeks. So one 64-gallon cart is sort of that sweet spot in the industry for a standard home, but some people have more need for capacity. Some people have less need for capacity, which is why the opt-in approach is one that's attractive to a lot of communities. So you're not requiring a homeowner to go to the 64-gallon cart, but they have the option to do so if they feel the need.
Sure, give them the option to pay for it, okay? But why charge the whole community for the 1,000 people getting 64-gallon carts in the contract? I don't see that. Why write it in that way?
I believe it's an option for the customers, right?
It's an option for the customers. Now, what you're looking at in terms of the proposed rate increase beginning July 1st of 2018 is basically a market adjustment. It does incorporate some of the cost of the carts that would anticipate being deployed, but the primary motivation for that rate change is the expectation that there's going to be a standard CPI increase of up to 3% anyway, and then if it's the 4-year contract, another 0.5%. If it's the 3-year contract, it's about a 1.5. But the reason is your current price is under market. It's lower than it otherwise would be, primarily because I'll say it as bluntly as I can. You get a sweetheart deal with Duncan Disposal. They're right across the road there on Griswold, and you got a great deal. They've always given this community a great deal, and they've given you pricing below anybody would ever give you and be able to make money doing it. So you've got a new vendor in here trying to maintain those service standards, and they're doing that, but they are coming from further away, and they've got cost structure that's going to be different than somebody that's right next door. And any of the companies that are going to bid on this are going to be in the same boat as your current contractor.
I have a comment about the 64-gallon recycling bins. And although it will be an option, I think this is a good option because it'll encourage more recycling, but also the problem we have in my neighborhood with the recycling buckets is when the wind picks up, how much of that actually makes it to the recycling? Because I know when it blows into my yard and it's not mine, a lot of times that just ends up in the trash can. So personally, for myself in my neighborhood, I think having the option for the 64-gallon to encourage recycling and to have a lid on it so it's not blowing around in the storms is actually a nice touch. Mm-hmm. So.
Our container is teeming with stuff every week, so that would be quite an advantage to be able to put it into a larger bin. So.
Yeah, we tend to find less litter in neighborhoods. We tend to find it's more convenient for the homeowners, and we tend to find a 40 to 60% increase in recycling because, let's face it, if we have those bins and they're overflowing, we're more likely to throw what's left over in the trash because we can't fit any more in there. But if you have a bigger container, you have more capacity to recycle, and that's been what we've seen in the other communities where we've rolled out carts.
We've always enjoyed a really good contract. Actually, when I got involved in this whole thing, Duncan was already our provider. And they had a contract that had accoutrements to the contract that most other vendors weren't providing to the communities they were servicing. The idea of picking up appliances and pretty much anything that you said at the corner, they were willing to take away for you with no extra charge. There wasn't a special pickup call and all that kind of stuff. And GFL has honored the last version of Duncan's contract. And I'm pretty grateful that I think we still enjoy in excess of what most of the surrounding communities are enjoying. So
yeah, you're gonna see no change in terms of service level. The contract specifications would remain the same. The only thing we're really dialing in here on is getting the price, a market adjustment for the price, capping your long-term exposure in terms of price increases, and adding recycling carts to the mix so that you can have that improvement in recycling for those homeowners that want to move to the cart.
I have to say at the onset when Duncan was when I got involved, tipping fees were projected to go through the roof, and everybody was going to be paying enormous rates for trash hauling, and all of a sudden it just fell off of the edge. And I guess capacity must have been enhanced by allowing dumps to grow and all that kind of stuff. So, we really dodged a bullet because we could have been suffering by enormous costs had that not taken place. So I don't see anything going around us that's getting less expensive. So I like the idea of the 2% escalator being the max that it could go. So,
Maggie?
I just had two questions. First of all, just wanted to let you know that your large containers that you are now using do not fit in a lot of the garages of the homes that were built, 15, 20 years ago. And most homeowner associations have rules that do not permit them to store those containers outside. So there is a growing contention with the size of the containers you're providing to this community. So maybe your size of your containers fit very well down on 10 Mile where they have 3-car garages, but for the people, most of the people in this community, they're a little outsized, and we got along just fine with the size of the containers we had before. Just a comment.
Sure. Well, if I may,
yeah.
The contract will continue to be for the homeowner provided trash can, 35 gallons or less, and that's a size and weight limitation. The only thing that's potential to change is the cart, going from the bin to the cart. And you're absolutely right. Those don't work for everybody. For some people, they don't have room to store it. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to they don't want to displace anything in their garage or shed, and so they'll stick with the bin. And that's something that they'll continue to be able to do.
The other thing with respect to cost containment, that we got a sweetheart deal. I don't know if we got a sweetheart deal. I think the Duncan family was very, very astute at business practices. And I think the fact that they were located here locally, provided them with an advantage in terms of they didn't have to travel their trucks as far in order to get here. Many of their workers were located here in the area. And GFL has that same opportunity to move closer to South Lyon and move closer to this area and begin cutting its costs a little bit. So I'm a little bit hesitant to let that comment go without making a comment that, maybe GFL should also look at some ways of possibly incurring some cost constraints that would be favorable to the communities in which they serve and move a little bit closer. We have plenty of space in this area that you could rent and come to, and you would not have to travel your trucks that far, and you could probably save a little bit of money. So
well, that's a business decision. That'd be up to GFL,
That's right,
not
it's a business
ROSAC.
decision.
I would say that it's unlikely to see that happen for a contract that's 3,700 units, which is what South Lyon is. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I can tell you that the price that you got from Duncan was the best that, going bar 2 or 3 exceptions that I would say are, outliers. So I'll stand by my comment about the great deal that you had with Duncan Disposal, but you're absolutely right. Part of it is a function of geography and location, and part of it is a function of their history with this community. Having said that, the pricing that's before you, and I think in your packet you saw a graph that I put together on the 4-year deal. Your pricing remains among the lowest in the ROSAC communities. In the communities that are going to have better pricing, primarily Southfield is because of their size and density. But you're going to see very few communities, particularly in a bid situation, where you're going to get any substantially better pricing than what you've got before you, whether it's with your current contract or a proposed extension. But I can certainly let Sam speak to the business aspects of their proposal and their costs.
I'll certainly be pleased to answer any questions you've got, but I do want to make a comment about the size of the 64-gallon cart. While it's substantially bigger, 64 gallons, versus what you have at 18-gallon now, the actual footprint of the cart versus the bin is not that great of a size differential. It's the height. So if you've got room on the floor of your garage against the wall somewhere, that cart's likely to fit in that same area without much impact. But I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
I'm a little confused in here. The verbiage, is it a 4-year contract or a 3-year contract?
We came in and we asked for an extension, and we had a thought of a 4-year contract that ties in with some of the other local RASOC contracts. And then through our discussions, conversations, was asked to propose a 3-year as well. So that's why you see both.
But it's the same pricing for whether it's a 3-year or a 4-year?
You have pricing for a 3-year in there. I think you've got a copy of the proposal. I've got it over there if you don't.
You'd actually see slightly higher price increase with the 3-year contract. Basically, it's going from 40 cents per household per month increase under a 4-year contract, and that 40 cents per household works out to $4.80 per household, about a 3.5% total increase, which would up to 3% would be a normal contractual increase in the contract anyway. Under a 3-year contract, that price increase ends up having to be a little bit higher. It's 55 cents per household for 4-point-something increase. Okay. And again, it's because you're amortizing the costs over a short period of time. Okay. But in either case, if the council wishes to extend with GFL, in either case, your pricing is still going to be very competitive, below what I would anticipate, at or below what I would anticipate seeing in a bid situation. And perhaps more importantly, it keeps the city of South Lyon's overall cost structure for sanitation costs, which include, again, not just your contractor costs, but your leaf pickup program, your household hazardous waste costs, the battery collection in the lobby, a whole host of things associated with solid waste and recycling. Keeps them at the bottom of costs that are incurred by communities in Southeast Michigan.
Any other questions?
Well, I don't know. It means a lot to have a place where people can bring their volatiles, like the batteries, and dispose of old paint and one thing and another. You provide that service. We got to have places, and once or twice a year you have to take it someplace, you know.
We actually have 6 each year. Residents can go to any of those 6, any or all of those 6. And we also arrange with our contractor down in Livonia, so if they can't make one of those collection beds, they can always take it directly to them at no cost to the homeowner.
I feel comfortable with the 4-year agreement.
Well, I make a motion that we authorize the city to pursue an extension of the solid waste contract with GFL for the 4-year term.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a
Thank
lot,
you very
guys.
much.
Thanks for the information,
Yes.
too.
Have a good night.
New business number 6, evidentiary blood draw agreement with Huron Valley Ambulance.
Mr. Mayor and Council, this should be a pretty straightforward issue. We had an earlier agreement. We were uncertain how it would go, so we put an expiration in it, and for whatever reason, it didn't get caught that the agreement had expired. They're continuing that arrangement, and I forget exactly whether it was the police department or HVA brought this up. They want to renew it and make slight changes to the terms, which have been outlined in the agenda note. There's no huge earth-shattering changes to this. There's a small price adjustment. Possibly Chief Collins could answer the question of how often they do the draws. I don't think they use a ton of this, but it's a service we like. The relationship is working out well, and we recommend that city authorize the execution of the agreement as modified.
Chief, do you have any comments?
Sure, I can speak briefly to it. Just for those who are not aware, the reason for the HVA blood draws, the paramedics come on site to the police department and do blood draws for generally for search warrant issues on operating under the influence of liquor, where the suspect has refused to take a breath test. The other reason that they would come and do a blood draw would be for a case of operating under the influence of drugs, where again, either there's a refusal and we've got a search warrant, or many times we'll actually get a consent from the suspect to draw blood. It saves us a lot of time and is very convenient to have HVA come on site rather than have the officer have to transport the suspect to an area hospital, stand by, wait in line for a nurse or a phlebotomist to do a blood draw, and then bring the suspect back or transport the suspect then to jail. So saves us a lot of overtime, a lot of money. HVA did request an increase of $15 per blood draw, from $50 to $65 per blood draw. The same increase would apply for employee court appearances based on those draws. To my knowledge, in the time that we've had this contract, it has not been necessary for an HVA employee to go to court. The either drug or alcohol content and the blood draw is generally stipulated to. To speak to numbers, if we had 2 blood draws per month, that would probably be a lot. So we're talking about a very low number as far as the overall effect of the proposed increase. And the police department does request approval of this agreement.
Thanks, Chief. Anyone else have anything on that?
I was just kind of curious. Now, is this an assist for chain of control for the sample as well, being conducted at the PD rather than at the hospital?
It really doesn't impact that, because what happens when whoever draws the blood puts them into vials from a blood draw kit that we get from the state police. The blood samples are placed back in the box that the kit came in. It's sealed, it's initialed, and handed right back to the officer regardless of who draws the blood, and then the police department submits the sample to the state police lab.
So they're in the room the entire time anyway, so, okay.
Just a quick question regarding, the city of South Lyon is agreeing to pay the $65 per blood draw. Are we reimbursed by the individual?
We are not reimbursed, to my knowledge, for that. The exception would be if there's a crash. There is an ordinance that allows reimbursement for emergency services, and we could include that.
Okay.
So it's more unusual that we would be reimbursed for that.
Oh, because it would make sense to me that if an individual is drinking and driving and refusing to take a breathalyzer, and that we as the city have to call upon HVA to conduct this service, we shouldn't have to bear that cost. That should be something that comes from the individual who refuses to blow.
We can look at that. It's certainly within the court's power to order that
Yeah.
restitution.
Great. Well, thanks.
I got a question.
Carl?
Do you yourself or your command staff personally supervise the blood draw by the technician? Because it says in there that somebody's supposed to be an officer there all the time.
I don't personally supervise it because I'm generally not here at the time of the blood draw. However, either the command staff, there's often a sergeant on duty, but more often the arresting officer actually supervises it. And that's an absolute, that's not a choice. The officer witnesses the blood draw. The officer witnesses the fact that iodine is used to sterilize the arm or the point of blood withdrawal, rather than an alcohol-based swab. For obvious reasons, that would impact the validity of the test. So yes, you raise a good point. The observation is important, and it is done.
Okay, I just wanted to, it says that in here. Okay.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay, I'll make a motion, we approve the increase for the blood draws, evidentiary blood draw agreement with Huron Valley Ambulance. Is that right?
And authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the agreement on behalf of the city.
I can't hear him. What did he say?
I'll support that.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Moving on to new business number 7, liquor licensing ordinance. The recommendation on this is to postpone to January 22nd for the first reading.
Mr. Mayor and Council, so the subcommittee that was appointed has met several times. There's been substantial revisions, and given the length of time that's passed, and in an attempt to try and make sure that the stakeholders that participated in those meetings and might otherwise, anybody else that might want to see this, this information as revised, so there's a red line showing the September version compared to the December version, is now available on the city's website. We will go through, I was trying to work with city staff to make sure that the people that attended that meeting will get notice that it's available. And basically, this is kind of a first step to make everybody aware that it's coming back. I think, given the substantial changes in the amount of time, we would start with another first reading with the most currently revised version of the ordinance.
Mary, do you have anything on this? Weren't you on that subcommittee?
I will say that our city attorney has worked incredibly hard on this, and I'm satisfied with the way that it looks. I did touch base with a few of the stakeholders regarding whether they have seen the latest version, and they have not. But our city attorney has indicated that this will be posted as of, I think, tomorrow.
So I don't know, I don't have access to the website. So what I'm going to say is it's in this packet, which is on the website.
Is it too much of an inconvenience to send the individuals who gave us their emails that came to the meeting, if we can just shoot them a copy as a courtesy?
We can certainly do that.
Okay. I don't want to place a burden on you or your staff, but I think it might be a courtesy to our business owners. They provided their email. It's already there. We can just shoot a draft over to them and see
We
what
can
they have to say.
accomplish that from City Hall without delegating that to the city attorney's office. The only word of caution is I do have knowledge that a few of the people who attended the meeting did not choose to provide a email address.
That's true. That
but
is
for
true.
those addresses we have, we can get it out tomorrow.
I feel as though word of mouth travels fast in a small community. So oftentimes if someone gets it, they'll talk to others. So I do believe that if we do our due diligence, send it out to the individuals who gave us their emails, then from there we can't really do anything if they didn't provide us contact information. But I think that would provide them enough time to look this over, and by January 22nd, if they have concerns, they can come to the meeting and voice them.
And if it's a scanned document, they could send it to each other too, so if they didn't provide us with the information.
But thanks for all your work on it. And thanks, Chief.
Does anyone else have anything on this?
I make a motion that we postpone the liquor license ordinance until July 22nd at the regular. July, good heavens. January 22nd. Wow.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Thanks for that catch, good
No
grief.
problem.
New business number 8, review proposed fund balance policy. The recommendation is to review, edit to meet council financial objectives.
Mr. Mayor?
Tim?
I can try and orient you on this. This is not something that I prepared, but I did have a brief conversation with Lynn. So arising out of budget comments or comments during the budget process, and I think this is aimed at the idea of where does council want to have its fund balance as far as a percentage of the overall budget? Lynn has presented this. So I think it's, the idea here is to set a policy at target that targets what level you want your fund balance to be in relation to other, I think it's your overall budget. I didn't spend a lot of time with the details of it. So I don't know if this was presented as an action item or for just discussion.
I have a question.
But I think that was the issue.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Go ahead, Mary.
I have two quick questions. One is in the purpose, which is I think the first page of the ordinance. It gives a series of what this ordinance is supposed to do. And my question is, and direct officials in the methods to be used for increasing or decreasing fund balance. Where is that direction in this document?
It's on page 2.
Yeah, I think there's some.
Called
Where?
remedy for maintaining minimum fund balance. That's where it's at.
Who gets that direction, though? Is that city manager? Who is directing us?
This
I think it would be the policy that sets the direction. You're shooting,
Okay.
you're drafting your entire budget, setting your millage and drafting your budget to try and maintain a fund balance that is X percentage of your overall budget or whatever the numbers are, however you want to frame it. That's what you're trying to do. I think the idea here is how do you, or at least, this is not Lynn talking, but how do you increase your fund balance?
Right.
There's a couple of ways to do that. One is to cut your expenses or have your expenses be less than your revenues. That would allow you to add to your fund balance. What are the reasons that you would dip into your fund balance, and for what purpose and to what level would you be willing to reduce your fund balance?
So this is just, to clarify, this is just an outline of what we're going for, what our purpose is regarding that. It's not giving you guidance as to, hey, this city administrator is city manager, who's going to control this, or city council. Because that's kind of what I was looking for. And the same thing goes with the numbers. There's no numbers in here. There's samples of numbers from other communities, but I wanted to see what particular numbers we would be bringing forth and how that relates to us, like how that would benefit us as a city.
Well, I think and I don't want to speak out of school, but I think there's been some criticism of the city expenses exceeding its revenues and having to use fund balance, which has, over the course of a series of years, reduced fund balance.
Right.
I know from discussions with Lynn that has not been the response I've heard is your fund balance is very healthy. So those are acceptable uses of your fund balance. And the question I think she's raised is, okay, well, what are your targets? Why, you know, what is a proper use of your fund balance and what do you want to target? It's a pretty high level concept, I think, and this is a policy that would be binding on both the council and staff when they're preparing the budget items.
Thank you.
Budgets are difficult to be written in stone, though. So, I mean, this is really just trying to establish some guidelines and best practices, ideas. I like the idea. I have to say that we've been operating relatively on austerity mode for certainly the last 3 years. And, you know, so clearly identifying anything that would be beneficial to try to maintain your fund balance is in our best interest. But I think that it's probably pretty legitimate to try to determine what, and maybe, you know, trying to benchmark with other communities, what is the typical practice, what do people hold in-house for, you know, the rainy day fund kind of a thing, and do we exceed that, or are we right at that break point or whatever? But try to determine what that number should be is probably a great first step. And, you know, the rest of this stuff can kind of be tailored around trying to identify, or once we've identified it, the budget can be tailored to try to make sure that we retain that number.
Maggie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've spent a lot of time on this issue. In fact, I've spent the past year and a half or so working on budget issues, and this is one of the things that came up in my research. And a lot of communities have what is called a general fund balance policy. It's not an ordinance, it's a policy that City Council tries to adhere to, and it is goal-directed, which means it's a policy that is there to set sort of standards of what you would like to achieve. Whether or not you achieve the policy is something for you to come back every year and take a look at, but it's not necessarily something that is intended that if you violate the policy, you're going to have tremendous problems. It's meant to set a standard for making some sort of achievement and level of your fund balance. Many communities have these policies. South Lyon does not. It didn't surprise me that we didn't have one. If you look at the samples that Lynn provided to you, you can see the cities that have a fund balance policies. I mean, she gave you cities that have these fund balance policies. So it's also a requirement under GASB 54, the General Accounting Standards number 54. I read their policy. You can Google it. Just Google GASB 54, and you will come up with the information regarding the necessity of municipalities to have a policy like this in place. I think the policy is a good one. This is basically right out of GASB, the language that is being used. As to what our level is, I mean, that's something for us to sit down during the budget season and talk about. And you can't really sit there and compare and say, well, you know, South Lyon, I think we're only going to go 10% of our operating costs with respect to our fund balance, because we have very different financial issues than Novi, than Milford. So be very careful if you're going to start comparing other cities. Novi is probably more capable to absorb a punch in their budget because they have a higher tax revenue basis. We do not. You have to take this policy and put it in perspective where we are on the tax revenue side. We have flatlined our tax revenues. That's it. So you probably need a little bit more of a conservative a little bit more of a restrictive use of your fund balance, because you need that fund balance to get you through some really tough years. We potentially are going to move into some great economic years in 2018 and 19. We'll see how that goes, and that may assist us in building that fund balance back up. But if we have another downturn in the economy for whatever reason, whether it's war, whether it's whatever it is, we do not have a sufficient fund balance to get us through. You have to look at what it costs to run your police department, and you do not have enough money to pay salary and benefits for 1 year out of the present fund balance. And it may be acceptable in another community, but it's not acceptable, at least to me. So I think this is a very critical piece of putting the budget back together, which needs some serious work, and not ready to work with it tonight, but it clearly is on the path to taking on some very serious management of our budget, which I don't think has been there for a while. So those are my personal comments. I would just move that this policy be discussed and we postpone any further discussion on the policy until we get into our workshops for the budget season, sometime in March, whenever. We even have discussions. We even have a budget. I don't know.
Anybody want a second?
I'll say something.
Go ahead, Carl.
She's right about one part of it. One major disaster, such as our tube mill across the street, you know, say they get sold, okay, and they move out and they close the place. It potentially could bankrupt the town. Something like, we've had subdivisions that went bankrupt, but they got through it, okay? But I'm just saying, we are vulnerable, so we gotta set a tight bottom line, or benchmark line, to maintain our fund balance.
And Mary, to answer your question, if you look at the policy itself that's been drafted, if you look on page 2, it provides some remedy for maintaining the minimum fund balance range. I saw this in a lot of the policies. What it does is it provides some direction to city council or to your financial people as to how you deal with problems when your fund balance is meeting that minimum threshold. And I think the reason that it does this is so that you can get out of the politics of deciding what you're going to cut, and the policy does the legwork for you. I mean, that's the advantage of policies, so that you don't have to sit there and nitpick the politics as to why you're cutting something, and you got people that are protecting this group or protecting that group. The policy says you cut or delay pay-as-you-go capital improvements. So that decision is already made for you in the policy. And so if you cut those capital improvements and you're able to bring that threshold back up to your fund balance, you're fine. The next one says cut general operating expenses. Okay, if you can't get it from capital expenditures, then you start with general operating expenses. So you can adjust these issues to fit your criteria. You can put in here anything you want. The issue here is putting in criteria that leaves you out of the decision process when time comes that you have to bring this fund balance back up. It just alleviates all the battles and the fighting and the politics and gets you to just make a straight out business decision. So that's what it is. Are these the only 4? No, you can add more, but it's meant to be a guideline as to how you go and deal with the problems with that fund balance. So I hope that helps.
It does, thank you.
You're more than welcome.
So we had a motion. Do we have a second?
I guess I'm a little confused on the motion. Is the motion to table this till we have more information?
Postpone it until our, well, when you postpone, you have to give a definite date. So I will make a motion to postpone review or comment on the policy, fund balance policy, until the last meeting of February, city council meeting in February.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? New business number 9, consider potential candidates for appointment as interim city manager during the approved leave of the city manager.
I don't get a warm and fuzzy from these people, so.
Sorry. I'm Glenn. I had a couple things jump off the paper at me about a couple of them, about some things that we could definitely use someone with some experience on. I guess my concern is that nobody's in the area, if that makes sense. These people are going to need to relocate.
We'll have to reimburse for that.
Well, and the one that does have seemingly some local accommodation isn't something that I would look to entertain, so.
I would like to give some more thought to other candidates and do some more research before we choose someone. I want to make sure if we're going to choose someone, we take our time and we do it right.
Well, can I say something?
Yeah, Carl, go ahead.
I think we should make an attempt to contact the top 2 or 3 of the runners-up from when we selected Lynn from a choice of 12, wasn't it? Something like that. And just see if they're available. They lived around here, and they lived in the vicinity of South Lyon, as I recall.
No, they didn't.
No, I'm wrong?
No, they were
There was
on
one
Irish
candidate who
Hills
lived
to-
in New Hudson. That was the closest.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Thanks, Chief.
Well, I would recommend we make an attempt to just reach out to them to see if they're available.
This is kind of coincidental, but there's a fellow that I had gotten some information from. He used to be the CM of Rochester. And now he's a consultant and a professor at, I don't know, some college. But he's a consultant and primarily he's like a budget savant, and which is something that I think that we could certainly take advantage of. But unfortunately, his circumstances with his teaching, he typically doesn't do interim stuff except during the summer when school's not in session. But he's also the vice president of, I think it's called HGov. It's on there. So it's essentially like a privatized version of MML's candidate search kind of a deal. And he's spoken very highly of, and I mean, this is, at least there's an example of other resources that we could be looking at rather than simply relying on MML.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, I didn't feel very confident with the way things turned out that way. So there are other steps that we can be taking. So I intended to. I got this email today, and it sort of outlines that whole thing with everybody's emails, and our website doesn't import contact numbers very quickly, so I almost have to do it by rote. And unfortunately, I hadn't. I mean, we've only been together for a little short time, and there hadn't been any need to reach out to anybody so far, at least for City Council. You know, the whole broadcast to everybody on there. But I'll take care of that and get this out to everybody tomorrow, and so you guys can all have an example of at least what he could do for us, knowing that there certainly have to be other alternatives. If he's existing, there are other avenues as well. So.
Well, I have to agree. Some of these were from out of state, so I don't know why they're here. But I will say that some of them I found very interesting because it lets you know what some of these city managers are doing. One here, he developed and wrote an ordinance aimed at cost recovery, so actually some ordinance writing. Another one, activities, he assisted with the development and management of a rolling 3-year budget for Downtown Development Authority. We're lucky if we can get a 1-year budget. I thought that was pretty good. Those are good credentials to have. Another one created a retirement succession plan. I had talked about succession planning in the city over a year and a half ago. And here it is in somebody's resume. Somebody reestablished a 20-year street repair and construction plan. Haven't seen that here. Here's another one, created a 20-year park from the former landfill and dredge spoiled areas. So you can see what some of these city managers are doing for other communities. And what's interesting is that they are serving populations well over the population here in South Lyon. So although I was impressed with some of the criteria, they're out of state. And I'm concerned about the budget season, so I'm not quite sure. To me, that's the priority, is getting, you can't go through another budget season like you've done the past 2 years. So how that gets resolved, I don't know. I don't know, what are you going to do? Are you going to open this up for interim managers? By the time you interview, it'll be the end of January, beginning of February, and she'll be back. So do you even bother?
Keith, can we just keep you?
I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying, realistically, your next meeting is January 22nd. You know, I don't know what you're going to have at the January 22nd meeting. What, more candidates? I don't know.
Put him on
You
the
won't
spot.
make a decision until February. She'll be back.
How can you read this list?
I don't know where council wants to go with it.
I don't know, I'll say something. We need a real person. And that one part of the resume, that one fellow was city manager, Allen Park. Allen Park's a pretty big place, okay, with a lot of people. They all had good qualities, okay, individually in the different towns where they, you know, sped around to. Are they going to agree to come here for, you know, 3 months? What is it going to be? What can we offer them? That they're going to come in here for us for 3 months to, as an interim city manager, okay? I don't, like Maggie said, I haven't got an answer either, you know?
Well, read this email when I send it to you tomorrow. For that matter, if anybody wants to take this, I just printed one of them out, but...
Is the individual available now?
He's available for assisting in the event that Chief Collins were willing to stay in the role for the day-to-day. He's available for anything that would be like an emergency circumstance, and the budget aspect of it, he would be happy to help us. And his specialty is essentially creating 5-year budgets. So he just got done with Northville, and I've heard nothing but raving reviews about his budget skills, so I think that would end up serving us well. Certainly warrants a conversation.
Thank you, Bob. So do we got any action on this? We'll wait for the copies.
Yeah, might as well. I don't see this going anywhere.
Oh, I don't know.
Now, so Glenn, when you talk about like an emergency situation with this, and I know you just got the email today, so I'm sorry.
I did have a conversation with him, so we kind of roped out.
Is this someone that has a background in helping with budgets and stuff like that? Would he be available for that?
Yeah, that's what I was just saying.
Okay.
Right. Yep. So we've had a number of people. Jim Graham had offered up. Lori Mosier had suggested that someone from Plant Moran could perhaps help us sketch out a budget. You know, I mean, at least to try to rough things in so we could have some understanding of where we are at this stage of the game, so
Right.
try to forecast stuff.
I think what I would do is I would prioritize what is the most important, and I'm being a little bit selfish. To me, it's the budget, only because I put a lot of time into studying it. And thank you so much, Bob. That's so kind of you. And I think the budget's really critical.
Thank you.
And if we solved the budget component, then maybe the city manager issue can sort of rest or be set aside or put up on a bookshelf, as I always say.
Thanks.
Until another day.
Right.
What did Jim Graham say? Did Jim Graham call you?
Jim Graham sent me an email. I responded briefly to it, but I have not spoken with him personally yet.
Is he available or?
I believe he would be available. Before we get too far down that road, we also wanted to be able to have a conversation with our city bookkeeper to make sure that we weren't running afoul of any internal issues.
Well, I think that the issues that I brought forth at the last meeting or so are issues that really we need someone who is highly trained, highly experienced in the area of budgeting, and that includes somebody who is able to delve into municipal finance issues. I believe that the bookkeeper is very competent at many, many things for the city. I did have a conversation with her, and I'm just not convinced that dealing with enterprise funds and dealing with some of the more complicated issues are part of her bailiwick. I also think that this is a time where the city should probably get serious about its budgeting function and begin making changes that are needed, and we begin listening to the professionals that do this for a living, that are highly trained, highly skilled in performing this function. I did contact Jim Graham. He came to me through about 3 sources. He does have a background in municipal finance, and he also has a background in managing the budget for the South Lyon Area School District, which was a budget of about $60 million. So if anybody can get in and crank out some numbers, he served a school district extremely well, and this is what he does for a living. This is his reputation, and it is he comes with a very superb reputation. So I would say that I would not be opposed to putting the city manager issue to the side, resolve the budgeting issue, because whoever is going to start on this budget, it would be my position that they complete the budget to adoption. So if our city manager comes back in February, she will not have budgeting responsibilities. It will be whoever is in place to start this budgeting process. We need a minimum of a 3-year plan put in place. We need somebody who will sit there and work with the numbers in some budgeting for the DDA, which I haven't seen yet and have asked for. And I additionally spent some time on the phone today with Marlene Beach. She's from UHY LLP, and they are an entity in Southfield, and they were referred to me through MML, and they specialize in government accounting and auditing. They do have a division in their company that specializes solely in doing exactly what my phone call was about. They can come in, they will do the budget, they will do the planning, they will provide guidance and consulting. They have 30 years of accounting and auditing experience. They can perform process optimization, which is how things are done and run in the city and how to improve upon that. They can also provide policies and procedures. And no offense to the bookkeeper, but in my discussion with Marlene this afternoon, came up the issue of Act 51 monies, and you really need individuals who are experienced in dealing with state statutes, dealing with budgetary issues, and I just think that these are issues that the bookkeeper probably is not that well versed, where these people are dealing with this stuff every day of the week. The policies that they draft them so that they are compliant with state statute and GASB accounting statutes standards. Again, this is a far different level of experience in terms of a budgeting function than what we presently have in-house right now. So I would say that I would be willing to listen to Jim Graham, maybe bring in Marlene, have her do a presentation, and I would make a decision within the next 2 weeks and get somebody on board immediately handling the budget. There are many, many issues with this budget, and you can't let it go. Whereas with the city manager, we can float this for a while. You're in charge. People know what they're doing. Let's get a professional in here and start on the budget. To me, I'm prioritizing the emergencies, and the emergency to me is the budget. So.
Go ahead, Carl.
I've had many conversations with Jim Graham. He's a wonderful resource, and he's just down the hall from us here, okay? I've been in his office numerous times. He's very open and understandable and level-headed, gets along with people, leads his team well. The man is a tremendous resource right in our back door here, okay? If he would come when he vacates the school, he's your employee right now, but when he leaves his position, if he would come and work for us for 6 months to a year, it'd save us $500,000 from 3 to 5. Okay, that's the way I looked at it.
Let me add to that, and I do not want to speak for Mr. Graham. Mr. Graham is a wonderful professional I've worked with very closely at South Lyon Community Schools. I've had a candid conversation with him about a possibility of helping out over here on this situation. I would prefer to not speak for him. I've talked to him, and I've given him Chief Collins' contact. I think it would be best for. I just don't know what his availability is. He did just retire from South Lyon Community Schools. He's a top tier. He's a pro's pro. I mean, you will not meet a better guy. So I just think it would be in the best interest for everyone involved that Mr. Graham come in and speak for himself if he's available, or at least speak to you, Chief, and maybe if you want to put a team together or how you want to handle that.
I would be more than happy to arrange for whichever council prefers. I'd be happy to speak with Jim. I've known him for several years. That wouldn't be a problem. If council would prefer that we have one or more individuals appear before council, I will be more than happy to arrange that.
I also would just like to add, I think out of professional courtesy, that I would request that the bookkeeper be there if available as well. I think that they would probably be working together on this, and I think that it would be important that that individual is involved in this as well.
Certainly.
That was my intent, to at least have the bookkeeper in the loop to assist in knowing exactly what is being handed off and what will remain her responsibility.
Well, you don't have, I'll give you a copy of this as well, but one of the caveats in here is in the event that there's an interim department head is going to end up being the interim here for a while, and it looks as though that's going to be the case. While we're in the process of getting the budget rolling, I'd like you to reach out to Mr. Bertrano and James. James is a very affable, easy guy to talk to, and see what, essentially have the same conversation with him that you're going to have with Mr. Graham. So try to find out his availability and what price points and all that kind of stuff would be. So
perhaps I can have both of those conversations, and then, dependent on the city attorney's opinion, through some mechanism, short of the next meeting, advise council the results of those conversations.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Would we, I hate to push it, but I would be ready to make a decision at the next meeting. If Jim Graham can do it, I think what I like about Jim is that he knows the city, he knows the players, the stakeholders, and he's got a great background in balancing mills. And being able to coordinate between the city and the school district, to me, that is a great opportunity to have someone with that skill set.
Maggie, I'll add to that if Jim is available, his ability to put together a 5-year plan for the city would be incredibly huge as well.
Yeah, agreed, ditto.
And I'd also like council, just like I brought up the idea of possibly begin thinking about a part-time HR person, is also begin looking at maybe putting somebody in charge that is a financial director. Many of these cities that I get materials from that Lynn has given us, they have financial directors. Maybe a bookkeeper was good back in the 1950s or 60s, but, the city has grown, we've doubled in size, the revenues are there, and it's just time that maybe we take the next step to professionalizing some of our administrative services. To me, it is a little bit incomprehensible that we are operating in the year 2018 with nobody to do a budget. I just find that not acceptable. Particularly
the idea of hiring supplemental people for someone that is actually tasked with that job.
No,
that's ridiculous.
I have sat back and looked at the credentials of city managers, not only the present one, but the one before her. I have spoken to friends that sit on city councils in other cities, and financial management, financial budgeting is not a strong point of city managers. That's why these cities have financial directors. It's not their skill set. And every time you change city managers, you're about 1.5 years behind pulling your budget together because that individual leaves. In this case, we don't even have a person running sewer or water, so you don't have anybody producing budgets over there in those two departments because the skill level is not there from a budgeting standpoint. This is just the opportunity, I think, is there for the city to improve upon what it's doing, and this is a perfect storm, so take advantage of it and sail through it. Your charter even provides for a financial officer. It's right there in the charter. If at some time you decide to appoint one, there's actually a description. So I think somebody was thinking at some point there would be a time when the city would probably need it. Do they need to be here full-time? Maybe not, maybe 3/4 time. But you probably need somebody that is highly trained and sophisticated in handling accounting issues over and above what you're getting on the present market. It's not there. It wasn't there with the prior city manager, and it isn't there with the current one. It's not their skill set.
That's a pretty small sample, though. Mr. Vetrano was the city manager in Rochester, and he's highly skilled at budgeting, so.
I think we need to be open to exploring a couple of different avenues on this, and we need
exactly. If somebody runs into an obstacle, then we need some backup.
Yeah. Chief, do you have any problem reaching out to those two
none
individuals?
whatsoever. I can be on the phone to them very quickly.
All right.
If that's council's desire, I have 2 names already written down.
Okay.
I will make contact with them. I will check them as to availability, cost, capability, and as I said, report back to council prior to the next meeting by whatever mechanism the city attorney deems appropriate.
Thank you. Tim, are we required to take action on this tonight?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Does anyone have anything else that they'd like to add? Okay. At that point, then, we'll move on to the budget.
Number 10.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. My correction. Number 10.
Did you find yourself, Tim?
Yeah, so it's section 5.8 of the city charter. The council shall not grant or authorize extra compensation to any city officer, elected or appointed, or to any employee, agent, or contractor after the service has been rendered or the contract entered into.
Okay, let's just cut to the chase. Chief, is this going to be a deal breaker on that? Is there a way we can get him that money, or do we just?
Yeah, when I read it, council shall not grant or authorize extra compensation to any city officer or employee after the service has been rendered or the contract entered into. We're not raising the chief's salary as chief of police. He's has a separate position. This is how I look at it. This is a separate position. He is interim city manager. We are deciding what the compensation is for that position. He's getting paid hardly nothing to perform those services. I mean, that's how I look at it.
At a very high level, I might add.
I think you even dealt with this in the past.
Yeah. I mean, is that how you see it, Tim?
Well, services rendered is a problematic thing,
It's
though.
not great language, one way or the other.
But,
Oh,
all right, Mr. Mayor, I would like to take from the table the motion that is relating to the city's interim manager proposed compensation. Do I have a second on that?
second.
I just want to understand, are you taking your motion off the table? Okay.
So that motion, if approved, would
To
bring it
discuss
back before
again,
council
yeah.
as recommended.
Okay, so all in favor of that?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Okay.
Okay, I now move to authorize, and Chief, you'll have to listen to this because it's a little bit different than what was drafted. I move to authorize compensation to Chief Collins for his services as interim city manager to an amount equal to 25% of his current base pay, commencing January 4th rather than the 3rd. It's January 4th until further action by City Council.
I'll support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Thank you for catching that, Glenn. I'm sure Chief would have got me too. So, moving forward to the budget now.
I have no comments.
Glenn?
Aye, we've said quite enough.
We'll move forward to the manager's report.
Or in this case, the interim manager's
Yes.
report. Yes, I've been very busy, and it's been a long meeting, but I'll try to keep it brief. Chief Collins assumed the duties of the interim manager at 5 p.m. on Wednesday, January 3rd. With delivery of city council packets due on Thursday afternoon, this left less than 24 hours to prepare the agenda and packets for the meeting of January 8th. I point that out primarily to take the opportunity to extend special thanks to Joan and Lisa at City Hall for their assistance in compiling and producing the council packet and agenda, and hope that all were acceptable. I will skip over some things that were in the interim manager's report because you already had the opportunity to read them, and they are of minimal public interest. Skipping down to the next item of public interest, and that's already been talked about briefly, but Councilmember Kurzweil has arranged for Plant Moran to conduct a free seminar about understanding municipal finance on Saturday, January 20th at 9 a.m. The seminar will be held at City Hall and is expected to last until noon. Council members, department heads, and interested city employees are invited to attend. As to council members and other city employees, please notify City Clerk Deaton if you plan to attend so we can have an accurate head count for purposes of handout material. City Attorney Wilhelm has recommended seminar be posted as a public meeting. That is open for discussion by council members if for some reason they would choose not to so post it. Next item is the city received communication from DTE Energy. This seems to be an annual event. Their work planners will be coming to South Lyon again to inspect trees and vegetation proximity to their distribution system, primarily the power lines. Once the assessments are complete, DTE will contact homeowners directly if trimming or removal is recommended, And I stressed this as one of the important parts. DTE says they will not mark any trees for removal without a signed tree agreement card. So I think they're trying to be proactive in contacting our residents and not just come in with the chainsaws blazing. This has also been addressed briefly. The water department is currently working to correct billing issues for a limited number of residents whose October water bills were estimated. The problem is limited to those, as I addressed earlier, that there was a telemetry problem with the automated reader system. So some October bills were unusually high because they didn't get the summer sewer discount. And Phyllis is working directly with the affected homeowners, and I'm going to ask her to double check and reach out to anybody that hasn't contacted her. Any residents who are concerned or with questions can contact utility billing Phyllis at 248-437-2326. This is for council, but may be of some public interest. The Michigan Municipal League, or MML, their capital conference is scheduled for March 20th and 21st in Lansing. Registration is now open for council members interested in attending. Further information is available on the MML website. Please contact City Clerk Lisa Deaton if you plan to attend, and arrangements will be made on your behalf. I think I'll leave it at that. I did address a number of council inquiries, and I will only add that that will be a new standing item on at least my weekly reports to council. Many times when an individual council member asks me a question, if it's not specifically and for some reason confidential, I will share the answer with all council members so it's transparent and available. And with that, I thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Chief. Great. With that, we'll move on to council comments.
Wait, I have something.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Chief Collins, I just have a quick question. If we could get an update on the rental house and if we've gotten any bids for the roof repair?
I have not done anything as to the rental house. I will be happy to revisit that.
I'd like to know where we're at because I think we need to be making sure that we're taking care of our tenant.
I will check that.
Thank you.
Is that it, Rose?
Yeah.
Good job. That was good. I didn't want that falling through the cracks either. So thanks again, Chief. Now we'll move on to council comments. And why don't you start us tonight, Rose?
Oh, excellent. I just wanted to thank the DPW for filling the ice rink over at McCaddy Park. They also have done a phenomenal job with the roads this winter and the trails. I went out running this weekend and had no problems at all getting through them, and they're just doing a fantastic job. I want to thank them. I want to thank the Chief Collins for taking in this position and helping us all out, and looking forward to 2018.
Great. Carl?
Well, I had a wonderful holiday season, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to speak up, and I'm pleased to see Chief Collins is experienced in this position that we're thrusting upon him. And I think we're all going to be okay for the time being. Mm-hmm. But it's important that I just mention there's a lot of good things out there for all of us to share and look at, you know. And going through Maggie's sub, what is the name of it? Oak Creek?
Hidden Creek.
Hidden Creek. That was the most spectacular thing I've ever seen in this town. Okay, I've been in this town a long time. Yeah. I've never seen anything like that. Mm-hmm. Okay, and you wonder who organized this, who planned this the way this was. It would rival anything in the county, I believe, somewhere. I have been to the big deal down in Westland years ago, okay? And that certainly is a very spectacular version for us, or something like that. Anyway, there's a lot of good things out there for everybody to enjoy. I've had a lot of good meals, went to some parties, enjoyed my life. okay? And I would urge all the rest of you to do so, okay? That's what we're here for, to make the most of it, okay, and do the best we can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carl. Glenn?
We all received a little note from a couple named the Thompsons, and they were appreciative of Officer Tim Rapp's giving them assistance trying to get their child's car seat in on Friday that was just blisteringly cold. So I'd like to say thank you and kudos to Tim. That was really cool, and they were quite appreciative of that. It's nice to see everybody survive this last blistering winter, so I'm grateful that things are kind of moderating a little bit right now. So hopefully some of these issues, such as the Good Day Cafe's frozen water pipe and that will be abated. I noticed that DPW was out on the north side of town as well on the west side of the street trying to attend. Somebody had a curb stop key out there and they were doing something over there, so hopefully that's not too much frost out there for them to solve those issues. I don't have an awful lot more to add, so I'm glad. I hope everybody had a great holiday. I know that we certainly did, so thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. Maggie?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm kind of like Carl. I'm still a little bit in that Christmas mode. I had a great time with my family. I traveled out of state for Christmas and have my tailgating friends still in the parking lot at Lambeau Field. And the only thing that keeps you warm when you are in 30-degree weather is a pocket full of Viking jokes, which I have tons of. So I just want to thank everybody in the state of Wisconsin for just a great, great holiday. And I do miss my Lambeau Field tailgating friends. So hang in, everybody. That's why we have 2018. Well, you know what they call a Viking player with a Super Bowl ring?
What's that?
A thief. So.
Don't let Minnesota hear you.
Sorry. I just had to say it. Just had to say it. I also had an opportunity to be in the Good Day Cafe, and the Good Day Cafe absolutely is the place to go if you want to have a good day. I had the number one, which was a fabulous wrap. It was bacon, it had egg, it had pepper jack cheese and tomato, and it was in a spinach wrap. And then I had a caramel cappuccino. It was fabulous. I think that is just going to be an absolute golden jewel in this community. So when you have a moment, please stop into a Good Day Cafe where every day is a good day. I also want to thank Lori Mosher. She has been absolutely wonderful to me. Every time I have a question on the budget, she has just dropped everything and taken the time to answer my questions. And I just want to thank her for being so good at delivering services to people in the community that need, and particularly council members. I'd also like to recognize a new photographer that's in our area. Her name is Katie Wind from Katie Wind Photography. A lot of people really like her work, and it was brought to me by a fan of hers. It is just a great picture of South Lyon. I obtained some copies of this postcard, actually sent them out as some Christmas cards because they were just so fabulous. So Katie Wind Photography, I want to thank you very much for putting a positive picture on the city of South Lyon. This is downtown South Lyon during the snowstorm, and it was on February 1st of 2015. So if anybody wants to see it, it's just a great landscape picture. She did a great job. And I've already talked a little bit about this tonight, and I just wanted to continue to pound the economic news. Some of the economic news that you probably will not hear in the mainstream media for whatever reason is that we are in a fabulous time period in the history of our economy. As a result of the 2017 tax cut, we may actually experience an economy that could be pushing a quarterly GDP of 4%. I don't know if we'll get to it this year, but I will venture to gain that we will probably get 3.5, 3.7% GDP in 2018. We have not seen 4% GDP since the 1980s or the 90s. So for those of you in the room that are of a younger age, you do not know what it is like to live in an economy where things are just moving 24 hours a day. You have no clue what a good economy is. If we keep our fingers crossed, we could be in actually historic economic times. Being an economist myself, I can hardly wait to see some of the economic data that I have never seen in my life before. Nobody really knows what this tax cut's going to do for businesses. Let's keep our fingers crossed that the trickle down is going to be right here in South Lyon. And this is one of the reasons why I keep on saying is that we need to be in the right place at the right time. We have to be entrepreneurs in understanding what these economic opportunities are going to be, and we have to ride this wave because it has the potential for being absolutely incredible. I've never seen an economic environment like this. It's important to know unemployment rate is its lowest in 17 years. Home creation of the family unit is the highest in 10 years. The stock market, the NASDAQ are all at all-time highs and they're breaking records. What is being said out there about looking at your 401k is absolutely true. For anybody who is not reporting this economic news, shame on you, because this news is news we have not seen in a generation. So we, as a council, we need to understand the economic wave that is going to be coming. We need to make those decisions rather than engaging in kicking the can down the road. We have to understand what is going to be going on. I am excited about 2018. I'm excited about what's going to happen to the downtown. And I think this is the year that the city is going to break through and solve a lot of its issues. And that's the key right there. We have an opportunity to solve issues in this incredible economic environment. And that means legacy costs. That means taking care of the unfunded pension. That means resolving the budget issues and getting on track with a good, solid budget. This potentially could be the year, and we need problem solvers that are going to come to the table and look at solving the problems. We need to move forward. We need to embrace change. It's got to be part of the program, and we need to be innovative in our problem solving and demand and expect professional competency and adeptness at job performance in the city and the delivery of services to this community. So I think we have a unique opportunity that we may not have again, given the economic climate that we are just about ready to see. February 1st is coming. We'll see what those paychecks are all about. But I'm telling you, everybody that I'm talking to is saying we've never experienced this climate that we potentially are going to be in. So let's be smart on council and let's get through the problems. We know what they are. And that's sort of my State of the Union. Let's get the problem solved in 2018. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Maggie. I'll make this quick. I would love to just again welcome Chief Vogel to the community and part of the team. I think you're going to be a great fit. And like Glenn said, you got some big shoes to fill, but I think you're up to the task. So welcome. Also, I hope everyone had a good Christmas break or holiday break, because to build off what Maggie said, I think the potential is huge for a big 2018. I think it's best that we did get rested up, though, because there might be some grinds. We might have to do some grinding here. I also want to thank Chief Collins and the City Hall staff and across the board, really, even over at DPW, where we've been dealing with either loss of employees or people going on leave, and no one bats an eyelash. Morale is high, and that's great. And so thanks, Chief, and thanks to all our great employees over at City Hall, and let's get ready for a big year. So on that, I'm just looking for a motion to adjourn.
Move for adjournment.
Second.
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 All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.